Guys, does anybody else do that thing where you pull out all the books you've read in like a year, whatever, 6 months, and then get like an existential crisis of like, oh my god, I need to leave the house more? Does anyone else do that? Hi, welcome back. Welcome if you're new. My name is Flo. How are you doing? Guys, we are halfway through the year. I'm looking around at all the books around me and I have done quite a lot of reading this year. I mean, don't get me wrong, it'll be a lot less than some people, it'll be a lot more than some people, it doesn't really matter, but I feel like halfway through the year is a fun point to kind of reflect and like look back and see how much we've read. I'll count them all up at the end because I'm scared to do it now. I'm gonna whistle stop tour them. Like, we're talking one sentence. Okay, it's me, maybe two. No dawdling around here, no rambling in this video. Also, very quickly, just because I'm doing this in place of a July wrap-up, I just want to take a moment. I'll put a graphic on the screen. I came so close to finishing my monthly TBR. 7 out of 8, I think it was, or 8 out of 9, whatever it says on the screen is correct. And because I'm not doing a wrap-up, I just want to address it here because I want the praise. Thank you very much. Anyway, obviously we will cover those books at the end of this video, but until then, we're going to go all the way back to January and we're going to whistle stop tour these books. And let's start with the very first book I read this year. This feels like a million years ago, but I read The Curfew by T.M Logan. This is a thriller. It basically follows these kids who stay out past their curfew and then a girl goes missing. It kind of like basically follows how willing the parents are to protect the kids. And it's super interesting. It's such a unique thriller concept. I don't really remember the ins and outs of the plot, but I do remember it was a fun one to start the year with. Then a less fun one to start the year with. I read A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, and I loved it. I loved it, but I've never in my life been so deeply affected by a book. Ever. I'm talking probably like a week straight after reading this book. I genuinely felt like really like weird and off inside. If you want to read it, do. It's absolutely beautiful. It's such a stunning character study, but it is about 800 pages of pain, and please check your trigger warnings before you read it. Then, first series of the year, we are reading Gone by Michael Grant. I've read, I think, the first 3 in this first 6 months. This is like a YA dystopia series. Basically, all these kids under 15 get trapped in like a dome and they start developing magical powers, and it's like horror, romance, mystery, thriller. It's a bit of everything, and I love this series. It does not read YA at all. It's just like following younger kids, and it's so fast paced. There is such a huge cast. You follow like 30 or 40 people. They're all like so uniquely like crafted characters. Then we read Present Laughter by Noel. This is basically like a farce, I guess. It's like super fast paced, like very like over the top, silly circumstances, but it is only 143 pages, so it's one you can absolutely fly through. I think if you want something that's just like completely different and unique, it's a fun one. Then I started Magnolia by Jessa Hastings. To me, it's like a drama about their like on again, off again relationships. They're highly unrelatable characters. They're like very rich socialites. None of them have jobs. They're all kind of like not nice people, but their drama is fun and interesting. And there's lots of like darker content in here as well. But mostly you're watching like a toxic relationship, and it's kind of like they're always drawn back to each other but also always trying to hurt each other. But I think if you go into it thinking it's fun, drama, silly vibes, it's a fun one. Then we read Reminders of Him, which follows Kenna and Ledger. And Kenna, she's been in prison, she's just got out of prison, and she wants to meet her daughter because I guess she had the daughter in prison and she's never met her. And it's kind of like, again, it's similar to that one. It is kind of like listed as a romance, and there's definitely a heavy romance subplot in this, but it also really read like literary fiction, which I loved the like balance of that. It was sad and it was fun, and I really, really enjoyed this. Then we read Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This was hockey, romance, spicy, fun times. And also probably the book that has made me laugh out loud the most this year. I just thought her like writing style and her like banter between those two characters was so good. This was a silly fluffy book and it did exactly what I wanted it to do. Then I did reading fantasy for a week, which I think I explained in the video. I'm not really a fantasy person. I find it as a genre very intimidating. The whole reason I had to do that video was to read this bad boy. This is obviously A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. And I literally put this book off for so long. I don't know why. I literally don't know why I was scared. It's like the most accessible fantasy book. Like, it's not a very complicated story. It gets straight into it. It is so fast paced. Still haven't picked up the second one because it is long, and I don't like long books as a rule. Any book that is over 400 pages, I feel like you need to do an application to prove that you need all of those extra pages. If you've got an 800 page book, I think you need an application to prove you need them. A Little Life, you passed, but a lot of 800 page books don't. But I actually do think the next book in this series will pass my application process that I've just invented, because this was so fast paced. And if the second one is as fast paced as this, then I feel like I can get on board. Then again, this feels like I read this book so long ago. We read Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This is a big boy too. Over 600 pages. I'm just saying. This definitely didn't have the same pace that Fourth Wing did. It definitely slowed it right back down, particularly like maybe the first half, and you kind of ended up in this more like character driven like half of the book, and you kind of are like looking more at like Xaden and Violet's relationship, and it's very like them going back and forth in like arguments and like not trusting each other. And the sort of second half of the book definitely gets back to that more like action-packed thing that I think Fourth Wing had. And I will say the ending of this has set up the third book very nicely. And then I read Quiet Thunder by J.P. Harker. This was definitely the fantasy book that I had the hardest time with out of the three. As somebody who doesn't read fantasy, this was the one that I struggled with the most. This one is war-based. Like, these two are like romanticities, right? There is not a scrap of romance in this one. It basically follows all of these like different tribes and like all of these different like people in power, and it took me a long time to get my head around that. And between you and me, I'm not sure I ever completely did, but I think if you're like a big fantasy reader, like, then you will probably really connect to this book. Oh, and oh my god, gore, like so gory, but if you're alright with that, then this one. Ugh, one of my favourites of the year. Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. This book holds a place in my wee little heart. It follows Frances, and she is in like a poetry performing duo with her ex-girlfriend Bobby, and they're like friends now. And then the two of them meet a married couple, and it's basically like the very complicated relationships between the four of them. Flawed characters, it's messy 20-year-olds trying their best. It's everything I love in a book. Writing is just stunning. Then, for the life of me, I cannot find my copy of this. I read 1 Minute by Simon Stephens. This is a play that basically follows the disappearance of a girl in London, and it kind of follows like the aftermath of that. One thing that Simon Stephens does, he does dialogue just better than anybody. He does naturalistic dialogue in a way that I just think he must study language and like how people speak, because it is so natural. It's something I notice every time I read one of his plays. Then we read Hunger, which is the second book in the Gone series. This one kind of follows like the aftermath. Gone is more about the like sort of initial being in the dome, and then Hunger kind of follows the like when they start getting hungry and things like start going wrong and they're realising they're in this for the long haul. Then we read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I think I read these in a 24-hour readathon. I probably was not in the best state of mind to read this, but I do remember it was really short chapters, so it was like kind of easy to fly through. But this follows Nina. This follows Nora, who she has decided to take her own life. And when she does that, she basically gets transported to this library, and she basically finds all of these like books in the library, which each one is like a different life she could have led. And it's very philosophical, and I remember it sent me into like quite a big existential crisis, but it's also quite a like comforting book in a weird way. I can't really explain what I mean by that because it is quite sad, but to me it just felt quite wholesome. Is that a weird review? Maybe, but it's what you're getting. Then I did a video where I bought blind books, so they were wrapped up, I didn't know what was in them. The first one I got was Running Scared, which I'll be honest, I don't really remember much about at all, except that the mob family in this were called the Harveys, and I'm a Harvey, and they spent the entire time just like going in on the Harveys, and it was really funny. I think basically there was like an incident when she was younger and then she moved away, and she kind of like comes back and she's got these ties to this mob family. I don't remember the ins and outs of it, but I do remember, again, a very fast-paced, like, it's not really a mystery, you're not really trying to find anything out, I guess it's like a thriller. And in that same video, we got The Bullet That Missed, which is the third book in the Thursday Murder Club, which you'll know my dilemma with if you've seen that video. But basically, I have read the first one, and then I got the third one. And I went ahead and read it because they are standalone, but I do really wish I'd read them in order because I just feel like there were so many bits that I was missing. But these are like cozy mysteries, and cozy anything isn't really my vibe, like cozy mystery, cozy fantasy, that kind of thing. I'm very much like a high stakes girly, but I will say that this book is just wholesome through and through. Richard Osman is such a funny dude, and he's such a funny writer, and his like whole personality just floods onto the pages. And he writes old women so well. Like all of the characters in this are like 70, 80, 90, and he just captures them so well, and they're like such complete whole people. I'm just looking at some of the books coming up. I don't know what happened in this time period, but I literally read basically 5 books back to back that I adored. No, I can't count. 6 books back to back that I adored. So the first video I did was reading books that gave Saltburn vibes. So I started with Bunny by Mona Awad, which, look, I loved it. I fully see this not being a book for everybody, but it was a book for me. It was a book for me. It is so unhinged and bizarre. Feels like you're losing the plot reading it. Like quite literally you lose track of who is who. Like deliberately. Like one part of the story, nobody has any like character names. You're so far into this like cult that you don't know who is who. It's also probably the book that I've thought about most since reading of like any book this year. And we read If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. It's sort of like a murder mystery, but I feel like calling it a murder mystery is like underselling it because it's so much more than that. It also has all these like literary fiction under themes as well, but it follows these people at drama school. Basically someone gets murdered, the main guy Oliver is arrested for it, he does his like 10 years in prison, and then it kind of like flashes forward and back between him explaining what happened and him in the present. I'm not gonna say any more on it than that because I think it's a good one to go into as blind as possible, but it was stunning. Then the next video I did is probably my favourite video I've done all year, so please check it out. It is my video where I texted authors and asked them to pick my reads, and I'm not going to spoil who picked these books, but they are some of my favourite authors of all time. Maybe books that are included here, I'm just saying. But if you want to go watch that video to see who picked these books for me, please go check it out. But these are the books that were picked. So first up we had Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. This book is literally for me the definition of right book, right time, because the character was going through something that I was going through at the same time. This follows Queenie, and she basically, her boyfriend puts her on a break, and kind of in that time you see her not doing very well at work, her like struggling with her like friendships and like trying to like date other people, and it's very, very messy, and it also talks a lot about like racism and fetishizing black women, and there's lots of like very, very important conversations in here, but it's also so deeply funny. I adored this. I literally adored it, and again, this is one I think about all the time, and I think this will definitely be in my top books of the year as well. Then, continuing the streak of all-time favourite books, I read My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, which is one of those books that I didn't necessarily enjoy the process of reading, but I just think as a book is absolutely stunning, and I've never read anything like it. It follows Vanessa, who is 15 and she's a high school student, and she gets groomed by her teacher. I just think the way the author captured the complexities of trauma in this book, just another one that I think is genuinely going to stick with me like for the rest of my life. Not to be dramatic or anything. Okay, I meant to be speedrunning these. I feel like I'm slowing down. I'm going back to speedrunning. But in that same video, we read Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. And this was like a domestic thriller. They're like in this Scottish Highlands cottage, middle of nowhere, pitch black. They kind of hate each other. And the plot twist in this, stunning. Then we did finishing series for a week. So again, obviously I can't talk too much on these books because they're the second in the series. So we read Daisy Hates, which is the second Magnolia Parks book. I definitely enjoyed Daisy more as a character. I thought Magnolia Parks was not a very nice person. I don't think she was meant to be. But Daisy, I just thought was so cool, and her brother was so cool. And this one's more of like a crime family. I really enjoyed this. Although, I think I forgot to say this in the video. I have a real hatred of footnotes in books. Like a real hatred. And this has so many footnotes. I'm sorry, if you enjoy footnotes, you're wrong, but it's fine. Footnotes for me, I think because I'm dyslexic and it just takes me so long to like, every time I'll like go down to the footnote and go back up, it takes me so long to like find where I was, and I found the footnotes a little bit frustrating, but other than that, I did really enjoy this. Then we read Unravel Me by Tahera Mafi, which is the second book in the Shatter Me series, which is like YA dystopian, but I feel like everyone calls it dystopia. It's a romance. It's set in a dystopian setting, but to me anyway, it's definitely like a romance. Although that being said, the second one was definitely a lot more of a mix of plot and romance. I feel like the first one was very romance heavy and this one was like more of a mix of the two. And then Family Remains by Lisa Jewell. Lisa Jewell literally never misses for me. I just love her style of writing. This is the second and final book in the Family Upstairs duology, and it follows, the first book kind of follows this like family cult that they were all kind of in when they were younger, and then this book is sort of like the aftermath of that. Literary fiction mixed with the thriller. I just loved it. Then another book I sadly don't have a copy of was Luster by Raven Leilani. Again, unfortunately, I don't know too much about this book because when I read it, I had just got a puppy and I was getting no sleep. And I said in the video where I read it, I don't know what happened in it. I literally just don't know. So I'm not going to give a review other than to say very poetic writing. I feel like it's the sort of book that would have been very up my alley if I'd read it at a different time, and I would like to reread it at some point. But it basically follows this woman who gets involved with like a married man, and he's got a wife and a child, and she kind of ends up having this like kind of relationship with the two of them. Then, maybe my most surprising read of the year, Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. This was cozy fantasy, which I said earlier, not really my thing. This made me cry. Like, I was not expecting that. This ended up being such a wholesome book. Basically follows Wallace, who dies, and then he gets taken to this house and he meets all these people who are basically trying to help him like pass over into the afterlife. And it's a very like philosophical, like cozy book. Then we read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This follows June, who basically steals her friend's manuscript. June is a white author, her friend Athena is an Asian author, and Athena then dies and June steals her manuscript and publishes it as her own. And it basically follows the massive spiral of her doing that. And June is insufferable. Like, I love a flawed character, but I feel like we found the limit because June was awful and she had no redeeming qualities, but it was so fun to watch. It was like watching a car crash. It's a literary fiction, but it just reads with the pace of a thriller. And then I read Happy Place by Emily Henry, which is now my new favourite Emily Henry book. The themes in this, I just really connected to. The idea of like growing up, moving away from friends, like all of that side of the book I just adored. And I think the connection between Wyn and Harriet just, they had this sort of enemies to lovers like angst going on, and I ate that up because that is my favourite trope. Then I read Lies, which is the third book in the Gone series, which I won't speak on because it's the third book, but we read that. Then we read Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, which is a sort of time-travelling fantasy, except every time someone explained it to me like that, I kind of almost got the wrong impression of it. So how I explain it to people is it is short, interconnected stories surrounding a time-travelling cafe, but it's very much like introspective and like kind of philosophical, but the writing is beautiful. Like, it's very like poetic and reflective. And we read Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I think if you like Seven Husbands, this to me feels really similar vibes. It's like a now and then timeline about this like Hollywood family, and it's very much like family drama, like how like all these different relationships affect them, and it's stunning. And you also meet quite a lot of the characters from all the different worlds. Like, you meet Carrie Soso, you meet Cecilia St. James, like you meet quite a few, so it's fun. Then I read Fleabag by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, which is 39 pages. It is so short. It is a one-woman play, and it's just so unique and so funny, and I don't know how to explain the plot, so I'm not going to try, but just trust me and read it. I've got 7 more to talk about and then I'm done. Speedrunning, let's go. I read Flawless by Elsie Silva. It was cowboy romance, which I was nervous going into and I loved. I swooned. I was not expecting to. I did not think it was going to be my thing, and I can't wait to read all of the rest. The One Memory of Flora Banks by Emily Barr. This took me by left field because I thought this was a cute little YA romance, and it is not. It is YA and it's probably literary fiction, maybe a mystery. It's about this girl who has no memory and she's got like some sort of amnesia, and then she kisses a boy and that's like the first thing she remembers, which is why I thought it was a romance, but it's not. It's like that kiss is actually very creepy and like the guy is very odd, but the whole book basically follows her on like a mission to find him, and it does read very, very young, I think because the character, her mental age is 10. It has this kind of like repetitive writing style because she's continually having to like remind herself of things, but the concept is so unique. One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus, YA mystery, which honestly are two genres that are very hit and miss for me, and I read this at the end of a 24-hour readathon, which is always a problem because I always hate reading by that point, but I think this was just such an easy one to kind of like get through. And then my favourite title of all time, Everyone You Hate Is Going to Die and Other Comforting Thoughts by Daniel Sloss. He's a comedian. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this book unless you like him as a comedian, but I would recommend his comedy. If you like dark comedy, check him out. He's got two, at the moment anyway, two specials on Netflix, Jigsaw and Dark, and they're so good. They always have like TED Talks in the middle of them. They're like 90% stand-up, 10% TED Talk. Then in the same video as that, actually, I was finishing my TBR for the month. We read two plays we had on that month. We had Love from a Stranger by Agatha Christie, adapted by Frank Vosper, and then I read 448 Psychosis by Sarah Kane. Completely different vibes. 448 Psychosis is, along with everything Sarah Kane has written, so dark, and check your trigger warnings if you read basically anything in this anthology. And then this one is a bit more like classic Agatha Christie. This woman gets kind of like trapped in this like situation with this man who ends up being psychotic, but it's fun. And I guess it is dark, but it's not like, this is like dark. This is like, ah, it's dark. But it's like also Agatha Christie fun, if you know what I mean. And then last, but very much not least, we have The Chalk Man by CJ Tudor. The first half of this was very much like horror supernatural, and then the second half ended up being a bit more like classic mystery unraveling. But CJ Tudor's writing style, I just think is stunning, and I flew through this, and I think I said at the time I just felt like I hadn't flown through a book like this in so long, and it gave me horrible nightmares. But if you're not a wuss like me, you might really enjoy it. Oh, we're done. Oh, if anyone has stuck around to this point, very well done. Congratulations. This is every book I've read so far this year. Oh wait, I was gonna count. 1, 2, 3 plus the 2 that aren't here, 39 books, which I'm not gonna lie, my Goodreads goal was 50. So we're gonna smash that out of the park, I think. I feel like I set my goal at 50 and then got really, really into reading. My goal has always kind of been 80, so I'm basically very on track for that. Actually, to be fair, my sort of like new goal in my head anyway was 84, so I am a little bit behind, but I'm not worried. I'm not worried. Also, it doesn't really matter, like if I don't hit it, nothing happens, except that I will be sad, but also not really because it's not that deep. But anyway, 39 books in 6 months. It's not too shabby. Has anyone read any of these books? Let me know if you liked them. And I look forward to another 6 months of reading. And oh my god, doing this at the end of the year with this but like double is going to be so intense. I feel like I said I wasn't going to ramble and then rambled. I'm going to have to ramble even less. Talking of, I'm going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you're not already, and I love you lots, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!